Good afternoon. Welcome back to Native American Heritage Month programming at Metropolitan Community College. We appreciate the time you're taking to join us. If you'd like to further explore this conversation or know of others who could not attend but wanted to hear our speaker, watch for a post in a couple weeks of the recording. Thanks to Janelle's permission, we are recording today. Now I'm going to borrow words from the White House Proclamation for Native American Heritage Month. Since time immemorial, Native communities have passed down rich cultures, knowledge, traditions, and ways of life. But through our history, Native peoples' cultures, identities, and governments were not always seen as a part of this nation, but as a threat to it. Native people were pressured to assimilate, banned from practicing their traditions and sacred ceremonies, and forced from their homes and ancestral homelands. This violence and devastation cost countless lives, tore families apart, and caused lasting damage to tribal communities and institutions. Despite centuries of violence and oppression, Native peoples remain resilient and proud. Native Americans are essential to the fabric of the United States. They serve in the United States Armed Forces at higher rates than any other ethnic group. They continue to steward so many of our great lands. Their contributions to science, humanities, arts, public service, and more have brought prosperity for all of us. Their diverse cultures and communities continue to thrive and lead us forward. Janelle Whipple is from Isanti Land in Santee, Nebraska. She is a proud enrolled member of the Santee Sioux Nation of Nebraska. She is the Programs and Student Service Coordinator for the Native American Health Sciences Center for Native American Health Science Programs for Washington State University Spokane campus. She earned an AA in liberal arts from her tribal college, which is Nebraska Indian Community College, known to many as NICC. She received a BA in General Studies with an emphasis in History, Native American Studies, and Sociology from the University of Nebraska Omaha. A master's, and we are happy to have some of our colleagues from the University of Nebraska Omaha with us here today. Thank you. She received a master's in tribal governance and administration from the University of Minnesota Duluth, and currently is a third-year Ph.D. student pursuing a doctorate from Gonzaga University in leadership studies. Janelle states that her academic journey may look impressive, but she found it to be extremely difficult for various reasons. This has caused her to be a resource, mentor, and advocate for as many students as possible, helping students navigate along their academic journey so they have an enriched and rewarding experience. She also has the goal to be a positive role model for younger generations of Native American students, both from the reservation and urban areas. I just want to help encourage those younger generations that if I can do it, they can do it too. Janelle quotes one of her favorite Native American scholars, Deloria Jr. Every society needs educated people, but the primary responsibility of educated people is to bring wisdom back into the community and make it available to others so that the lives they are leading make sense. Please welcome Janelle Whipple, whose deepest aspiration is to live up to the responsibility to help her community any way she can.
Wakiyan Ska Win Dakota Chaze na Isanti Edwati ga Wakpekute band Hemataha. Good everyone, my name is Janelle Whipple. My Dakota name is Wakiyan Ska Win, which means White Lightning Woman. I come from the Wakpekute band, which translates to leaf shooters, and we were primarily known for being the war leaders of the band. So essentially when people wanted to go to battle or there was a chance at war, they would come to my grandfathers and they would ask, and then they would counsel among themselves. So that's kind of where that comes from. And I currently live in Santee, Nebraska. I moved back just a couple weeks ago from Spokane, Washington. So I just wanted to introduce myself in my tribal language, which is Dakota. And to me, the whole purpose of this presentation that I want people to know is I'm going to tell my story, and it's going to be in many layers. And we'll get back to my Dakota name through my slides. But I wanted to properly introduce myself, and that will be a focal point in my presentation regarding my culture, my language, and my heritage. And so with that, you'll see pictures throughout the slide, and I'll explain each picture as I go on. But I created this PowerPoint in my presentation to kind of reach all audiences, BIPOC community, high school, community college students, academic professionals who are advising BIPOC communities. I just kind of wanted to try to touch as many audiences as possible. And so my highlights will be my Dakota name, my journey through academia, some of my traumas that I faced, and then my advocacy in the workplace. The top, her name is Rebecca Mazukute. That is my great-great-grandmother. And then at the bottom, her name is Sophie Frazier, and then that is her husband, Lot Frazier. And so I'll start off first. I'm just going to be really raw and real. I have my own beliefs about land acknowledgement, especially in institutions in academia. However, as a person who is half Punkah, I can't stand here and come on this land without, I guess I'm going to call them a recognition. I want to recognize the Degiha people, which conclude of Omaha, Punkah, Kawa, Kennesaw, Kapa, and Kennesaw and Osage. Thanks. And then I don't want to go into a long history lesson, but I also have to acknowledge Standing Bear. You know, he had his trial here. He fought and advocated for himself, and he was the first Native American to be recognized as a human being, not a savage. So I couldn't start the presentation without giving recognition to them. So that is my grandmother, Lovey Valandra Whipple. She was an enrolled member of the Rosebud. She is part Santee. And I'm going to go into now my Dakota Chaze, which is my Dakota name, and the story behind that. So when a child is born, they can get a Dakota name through various, they can get names from various ways. I got my name from her cousin, my grandfather, and he named me when I was 3 months old, and he gave me the name Wakiyan Ska Win. And with that, he told them that I would have 3 things in life. And with that was I would learn my culture and language. I would end up being the backbone of the family. And lastly, when I would speak, people would hear my voice. And my mother just, you know, thanked him. He didn't say how he got that name. He didn't say why he gave that name. He just gave those 3 rules and that name. And with that, he didn't realize, I guess, as much hardships would come with that name. I am very blessed to carry that name. I, you know, embrace all those things, but being the backbone of a family, and I'm 38, but it's been that way a long time now. It's a lot, and I feel like I carry my family's burdens, and I would learn my culture and language from the time I was born. My grandmother was a fluent Lakota speaker. She always spoke around me. And then I would learn how to transition into being a public speaker. And so that story has guided me through to this point. So now let's talk about academia. As you heard my bio, as Barb was reading it, it sounded really good, right? And I'm not saying that conceitedly, right? If someone says and you see a paper and you're like, oh, she has, you know, she's almost got 4 degrees. That sounds And then I see people, they have 4 degrees. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. But what if I told you guys that I was on academic suspension 3 times? Not once, not twice, but 3 times. What if I told you I was suspended? Like they kicked me out. What if I told you I lost a full ride scholarship? What if I told you that I didn't even know how to write a term paper when I went to school? Would you believe any of that if you looked at that? Probably not. So before I go to Creighton, I'm going to give a shout out. We have Upward Bound students, math and science, so I want to give them a shout out. And I just want to tell you guys that I was in Upward Bound all throughout high school, and that really did prepare me for college. And it would be the mentors who would seal the deal. So and we'll talk about when I get to the workplace setting. I'll make a full circle and go back to Upward Bound on the programming side of the workplace. So I really like your guys' program, so I want to give them a shout out. So with that being said, in 2003, I got the Gates Millennium Scholarship, which is a full ride scholarship to wherever you want. It even will include the master's and the doctorate program, depending on the field. And I was the salutatorian. I had my way paved for me. I had sealed the deal. I got the scholarship. I got into my ideal dream school. Creighton was my dream school that I had wanted since I first went to a retreat there my sophomore year. And that was a big deal for Santee. Santee had never had Gates scholars. Santee had never really had people who went to private institutions. Like, it was a big deal for my community. It was a big deal for me. And then I got to Creighton, and I was sitting in English comp, and they said, all right, so all your papers are gonna be in MLA. So I jot that down. Then I'm in history class, and then they're like, all right, all your papers are in Chicago. It's like, what the heck is Chicago? And then I go to the other class, and they're like, all right, everything needs to be an APA. So I remember, and I don't think she showed up, but Tammy Buffalohead was my mentor and advisor. Shout out to Tammy. She has some thick skin. I go running to Tammy, and I'm like, Tammy, what are these? She's like, oh, they're writing styles. Don't you remember in high school? And I'm like, well, we did one term paper, and it was like 12 pages, but I didn't do any of that. I think I cited a few things and had a reference page. She's like, well, you need to learn how to do that. Here's a book. So I went to the bookstore, and I read the book. And I taught myself how to do APA, how to do MLA, and then I had to learn Chicago, and then they turned to Turban in history, which is another writing style. Now pretty much I think everybody does APA, but they used to have a lot of different styles. So then I'm sitting there in class, and I got the writing situation down. And then I find out that I'm still just not up to par to the other students. I still felt very intimidated. I still struggle with vocabulary. And it was just kind of like, did I fit? Did I belong? And so I went from 03 to 05. And then I had, I guess you could say like almost like a mental breakdown. So I took a semester off. I took medical leave. The scholarship was still okay. And then I went back to redeem myself in 06. And I was supposed to be at a junior level, so roughly 60 hours. I think I had 30. I was very far behind. And then in probably October, my sister called me. She had just had my middle niece, and my mom was really sick. She would get diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis way later on during the months, but I decided to go home. I remember that day when I went to fill out the paperwork, the dean stopped me and he's like, let's talk. He's like, what's going on? I said, I'm depressed. I'm not doing well. I'm probably going to just fail out. Plus my family's sick. He said, well, I know you have the gates. Why don't you take another leave of absence? You can take up to a year and a half. You have another 2 years left on your scholarship. You have all these things. And at that time, I was extremely hard-headed and stubborn. And I've really outgrown that. But at that time, I was like, no, I'm leaving. I'm done with this college. So he signed the papers. He's like, I wish you well. So I left. I helped my mom. I helped take care of my sister's kids. And then I started working. And I just really, really missed school. Although I did horribly at Creighton, I missed learning. So then I ended up signing up at NICC. And I liked it. It was small classes. I got a job at the casino as a cage cashier, and it was going pretty well. And then all of a sudden, my scholarship's like, we haven't received your paperwork. So I was like, well, I'm doing my paperwork. It should be coming. So I called and I called and I called. And at that time, their financial aid person was in Macy. So I went down to Macy a few times to go see if I could catch her. And I was like, so I went to that advisor and I was like, she's not answering. She's like, yeah, I know we kind of have some things going on. And I was like, well, I'm on the verge of losing my full-ride scholarship. And then pretty soon they called me and they said, we can't extend you no more. We're gonna cut you off. So I lost my scholarship. And so I was like, well, it's all right. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to do it somehow. So then I got 2 years in at NICC. I was in a good point. My mom was in a good situation. So I applied at Wayne. And I got into Wayne. And that first semester, I almost made the dean's list. And then I got a call, and my uncle's cancer came back. So then my aunt said, well, I can't take care of him. He's going to have to go on hospice. Well, we went to the hospices, and my uncle just was like, you could tell he was really torn up. So I was like, well, what if I stay with you? And my mom's like, what if I stay with you? So we took care of my uncle until April, and then he would make his journey. And Wayne worked with me, and so I ended up finishing the semester, like, remotely. And when I went back the other year, the following fall, I just couldn't get into it. So I got on probation. And then the second semester, I still was on probation. And so they said, you have this summer to get your, because I had took some incompletes, you got to finish your incompletes so you're not on probation. Well, then they suspended me. And so I went to the person, I said, how do I reverse this suspension? Because this is on my academic career now, even if I choose not to go back here. They're like, well, you have to write a letter. So I was like, all right. So I wrote a really nice letter. And I took it to that lady, and she's like, but what's your action steps? And I said, what do you mean, what's my action steps? She's like, well, you're telling me you're sorry and you're going to work hard, but how is the board going to see that? And that's my first advocacy, was that day, because I had to prove to this board, if they gave me another chance, I was going to make good on my word. Nobody teaches you that when you're going through school, how to actually advocate for yourself. So I was like, all right, what's wrong with me? Well, I'm depressed. I probably need study skills, and I probably need to go back to the library. So I wrote all that down, and I put it in the letter. And I was like, all right, so here's my action steps and how I improve. So I went back to the board, and the board's like, well, this looks good. We're going to let you back in. And then there's that one guy. There's always that one guy. He's like, well, before you say anything, what happens if you get in this situation again? What are you going to do? And I said, you know what? I'll withdraw. He's like, what do you mean? And I was like, if I get back to where I'm going to get suspended, I'm going to withdraw. Because I have to make good word on my word, and that means I'm not in a good mental space. So I need to take time off again to get back to that. He's like, that makes sense. So they let me back in, and I finished out the semester, and I think it's a 2.0. I had a 2.1, so I survived. But the following semester, I withdrew again. So I go back to work at the casino. My mom this time is working at NICC. She's like, I was digging in your file, and you only need a semester left to get an AAA. I was like, no, I'm done with school. I have 2 failures under my belt. That's it. I'm done. I'll just work at the casino. I'm good. I was making good money, and I had a lot of tips. She's like, just do it. Just do it. So I went back, and I walked in 11. But what I found out when I walked is the time I started to the time I finished, they never did my financial aid. I had a $5,000 bill. That wasn't my fault. So I went back to the board. I was like, I want this removed from my record. They're like, well, this is $5,000. We can't just do that. I'm like, well, that's not my fault that your staff wasn't accountable. They should have been billing my stuff. They lost a scholarship. Again, I had to advocate for myself for their mistakes. Wasn't my fault they never touched my bill, but I was at fault for that bill. So after probably a couple months of going back and forth, they agreed they would wipe that bill clean. And so they held a computer science class, though, that I had a test out of. That's why the degree was actually confirmed in 13. So that was the first lesson of advocacy, but it would keep continuing on. So then I transferred to UNO. I was an online student. And UNO was pretty good to me. And I went slow. I went part-time, and then I would finish. In 15, I'd walked, and then I graduated in 16. And then I went on to Duluth. I actually wanted to go to law school, but with COVID, I couldn't take the LSAT. And I'm not a good test taker. And so I won't say I threw in the towel, but I made a prayer. I'm pretty spiritual, and I decided that, you know, the Creator was taking me somewhere else, and I would end up at Gonzaga. And Gonzaga is a private school. They're Jesuit as well. I will say they're pretty liberal. But I would counter in things that I didn't expect to encounter. I love my classmates and my professor, but I would learn truly what academia is in the doctoral program. And we'll go back to that when I get to the work studying spots. Now that's just my academic journey. We're going to talk about my traumas. So I grew up in a very traditional household where drinking and drugs was not allowed. Because my mom made it an issue to break the generalization of alcoholic, and she wanted to break that family cycle. And so I really commend her for that. And so she raised us in a drug and alcohol-free home. But being the rebellion that I was, I drank here and there. I experimented with drugs here and there. Not proud of that, but it's part of my story. And I really like to party. However, when I was 19 years old, I was sexually assaulted at a party on the res. And I didn't start talking about this publicly until last year. I had told a few people over the years, but even some of my closest friends never knew that. And I told myself that morning I woke up, it didn't happen. And I told myself throughout the years, if I didn't think about it, it didn't happen. And why didn't I talk about it? I didn't know who it was. All I seen was a black shadow. I couldn't even go to the police because I had no story. So what I did for years when I would think about it is I victim blamed. And I would have to go to counseling. And what me and my counselor talked about was I had been safe on the res in the community for so long that I was so comfortable that the night it happened, it was an outsider person that wasn't from the res. And I let my guard down. But because at that time I was a lot thinner, so I wore mini skirts, halter tops, high heels. And I told myself that happened because I was too drunk. I told myself that happened because of how I was dressed. And I told myself, how could you be so dumb to let that happen to you? And then if I was like, well, if I just bury it, then I don't have to think about it. But that sexual assault would lead into years from 19 to about 22 of pure alcoholism. I was a bad binge drinker, and some people don't even really know how bad I drank. I drank probably every day at night, and I purposely wanted to get blanked out because it helped me forget a lot of stuff. And so I wanted to talk about this because we don't talk enough about sexual assault, and that we always hear the word victim and we always hear the word survivor, and I don't like either one of those words. I wanted to talk about it because it's okay if something really bad happened to you, and to acknowledge that, because you have to heal from that. And you can't fully be a happy, completed person unless you're healing. And that's part of my story. And I really wish I would have advocated for myself all those years. But if I can advocate for myself and talk publicly about that, and it will somewhere, some way help someone down the line, I want to talk about it. And I want to talk about binge drinking and that being an addiction. And so that's why I wanted to talk about those traumas. And then at Wayne, I was stalked. And I think we joke about being stalked. I know in the past I have. And we see it on Lifetime movies, but we actually don't talk about what it means to be stalked. Or even how that happened, because again, you can victim blame, you can do all this stuff. I was a history major at Wayne, and I loved history classes, and at Wayne there was only 12 of us. We knew each other. And so we were this little circle. We were nerds, right? We would see each other in the library. We would have study groups. We were a circle. And so we would be, like some of our classes were where you had to talk to each other, like, you know, you had to get it done for your curriculum, your core curriculum. And we were in a history class, and there was this one guy who transferred in, and he was just, I don't want to say outcasted, but he outcasted himself. And I was very close to the professors, and so the professor was just like calling him on his BS, because supposedly he was out of town and all this stuff. So the professor called me over. He's like, can you give him your notes, because he's going to be gone? And he did the air quotes. I was like, okay. So I met him after class. I was like, let's meet in the library. And he was very cocky and very arrogant. And I was like, you're lucky I'm getting extra credit for this, because I wouldn't even help you. He's like, I'm sorry. So we exchanged numbers, and he came back on Sunday, and I came to get my notes. And this would lead to a study group scenario where he wanted to meet up and study because he said I was really good at history. Well, what I didn't notice at the time was every time I turned around, he was there. It would be a couple of my friends who noticed. We would go out to eat, and he was there. We were in the lobby in the dorm, and he came walking on our floor. And they're like, why is he always around? It's like, I don't know, it's a coincidence. It's a small campus, it's a small town. They're like, it's kind of creepy. I let it go. I thought, well, best maybe we could be a friend. And so we continued, I guess, our friendship. You know, I made it known there was no attraction. And what happened, what I think triggered him I had to take a test because I was sick. So I was in this little independent room taking my test, and he come up and he opened that door, and I'm supposed to be locked in there. I was like, how did you get in here? How do you know where I'm at? Get out of here. He's like, I have the answers. I was like, you're not cheating. I could get expelled. And so I just kind of shoot him out. And I hurried up and took my test. I took it to the professor, and I was walking out the door, and he caught me. And I was like, I'm really upset with you. Like, what makes you think I would cheat? I'm not a cheater. And I went on and on and on. And I was like, I want nothing to do with you. Lose my number. We're not studying together. Like, just leave me alone. And that triggered something, because after that, he was waiting for me after class. I start having to have friends walk me to class. And he was always blowing up my phone. This was like the old flip phone, so I didn't know how to block him. And then what scared me was there was a walkway, and I was coming up from working out, and I was going back to my dorm room, and he came out of the weeds, and he cornered me, and he pushed me against the wall. And nobody was around. I didn't have my phone. And I flipped out, and I took off running. And so that really kind of, I guess, triggered me. So I went to my RA. I said, what can I do? She's like, you can't do anything. He touched you, but he didn't assault you. And so I was like, what the hell? So I was like, all right. So I had an escort all the time. And then towards the end of finals week, after him waiting in the library, waiting after class, blowing up my phone, he basically begged me in class. He's like, can I please get your notes? And everybody was looking at me, and I was uncomfortable at the time to say, hey, I think this guy's stalking me, which I probably should have done. I said, I have a flash drive. I leave it at the library. You can pick it up. So he did. And so then later on, he's like, I have your flash drive. I'll give it to you. I said, no, I'm done with finals. Keep it. I don't want nothing to do with you. I'm trying to figure out how to block you. He's like, don't block me. And then he just kept blowing up my phone. And then I went to take my finals. I went to my room to sleep. My friends left. I locked the door. And all of a sudden, I hear the doorknob turning. And I'm like, what the hell? And my phone was on silent. And then he's blowing up my phone. Texts are coming in. It's ringing. And then it starts getting escalated. And I'm like, someone's got to hear this, because it was a crowded floor. I'm like, somebody's going to come. Someone's going to come. Then all of a sudden, he starts banging the door, just ramming it. And I hear it, just kicking at it, just breaking, trying to break the door down. And I'm sitting there, almost crying, scared, what do I do? What is he going to do when he breaks in? Is he going to rape me? Is he going to kill me? You don't know what they're capable of. And he almost breaks the door, but not quite. And then I wait for a long time, and then all of a sudden I see my flash drive go across the floor. It's like, oh my God, this guy's psycho. So he leaves, and I come out after he leaves, and then the RA comes out, and I was like, I just almost got attacked. He tried to get in. I need campus police here. Call Wayne. I want a restraining order. This guy's crazy. And she's freaking out. And I was thankful that there was a girl in the shower or the bathroom. She did hear the final pounding of the door. So she could corroborate my story to a point, but she didn't see anybody. So campus security comes, and then they're like, well, we can't involve Wayne police because she didn't get attacked. I was like, so I have to, again, get killed, assaulted, or raped before you guys do anything. And that was a moment where it really upset me, because we don't talk about stalking, and it happens multiple times. And as a Native woman, I always feel like I have a target on my back. And so that was somewhere where advocacy didn't work for me, even though I pushed it and pushed it and pushed it. And so I just want to say to any young girls, trust your gut. And my gut told me when I first encountered him that I should have ended communication. But me being nice, I try to help, and that's maybe my weakness. But always trust your gut, especially when it feels like something or someone isn't right. So, transitioning into my last area of advocacies in my stories would be the workplace settings. And I have tribal entities I worked with, I have academia, and I have my new job. And so with tribal entities, some of the things that I have faced that I've had to deal with is oftentimes leadership roles are left to the grandmas or our young men. And so being a young, educated Native woman, I often get overlooked. And it really sucks. And I've learned to come to terms with that. Or maybe my path is somewhere else. But I've had people tell me that they've heard job panels say the reason I didn't get the job is because I have opportunities elsewhere. We need to give it to someone who doesn't. To me, that is very unfair. To me, especially coming from the reservation. And so my opportunities have been very limited, and I've been passed over for many opportunities. And I don't know if it's because we're in survival mode that we can't see progressively, but I've always had to advocate for myself, whether it was on boards, panels, in the job setting. And you could face that, especially if you're a young woman in leadership roles. With academia, it's a little bit different. What you're going to face is advocating for your pay scale. They'll give you the job, but it's going to be at a way lower wage than males. And I hate to say that, but that's the truth. And so you're constantly fighting for a fair pay. However, what I've also faced is when I worked into TRIO programs at USD, I worked with Upward Bound, I worked with Talent Search, and I worked with Student Support Services. Oftentimes, BIPOC, low-income students are labeled in a certain manner. And that did not sit right with me. I don't like the words disadvantaged or they would also label them FAFSA-PALD students. I get maybe on a computer system that's the label, but in a meeting we should not be referring to our students in that manner. And so when I would work in certain academia settings, I was always trying to stick up for our students that may be left out of the conversation. And so I tried to be a mentor and a resource for those students, and I tried to get to know them. And I feel that times, and I get advisors have a lot of workload. I advise too, and sometimes your time is very limited. But if it means going over the 5 o'clock schedule, I would do it. And I say that because I had 2 work-study students, and I got to know them, and I got to watch their body language. And I could tell that my work-study student, who was going to be a dental hygienist, when she talked about working with disability people, when she talked about, she did Disability Olympics. When she did that, her face lit up like a kid in a candy store. And when I asked her how dental hygienist school was going, she's like, it's all right, whatever. And I'm like, I'm just going to throw this out there. Have you ever thought about being like a special ed teacher? She's like, no. Why? I'm like, you don't really seem too enthusiastic for a dental hygienist, but you seem enthusiastic with, working at your job. And then one day she come in and she's like, so I changed my major today. And I was like, really? What'd you change it to? Education, emphasis in special ed. And I was like, oh, I'm so happy. And then I had another one who, she was actually in education. And I was like, how's education? It's okay. And I was like, oh, okay. And when I started assigning her tasks, she'd be like, man, Janelle, your job is so cool. And I was like, it's all right. And she's like, what do you call this? I was like, you call it programming, a coordinator. She's like, I like this stuff. And I was like, well, you could be an event coordinator, but you'd have to go into business. So a couple weeks later, she's like, I'm a business major now. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah, emphasis in marketing. So I was like, oh, okay. And so when I went to a staff meeting, they're like, your 2 work study students have changed majors. What's going on? And I was like, well, this is the situation. And they're like, well, they've never said that to us. I was like, never said what? Well, they never said they hated their major. I said, well, did you ask them? They're like, no, they don't talk to us. And I thought, okay, so you guys are the advisors and you're supposed to be mentoring them and advising them. Why am I, your admin assistant, being able to work with like your students? And so what I learned then is when you have a job like that, you really have to want it. You can't just have it as a job, because these students are passing through the cracks. And they could have went through school, been successful, got to their job, and then hated it and had to go back to school again. And so I learned that day, when you're dealing with people, you have to learn their story, because everybody has a story. And so I tell people when I work at WSU in departments, I tell them, you're a program coordinator or you're an advisor, but are you really getting to know the students? Are you really getting to know and connect with them? Because if you're not, then that job's not for you, or maybe that student isn't for you and you need to give it to somebody else. And so that brings me to WSU. And I got WSU. I was surprised that I moved to Spokane, Washington, and I really loved it out there. I came back because my mom got sick again. But in 1 year at WSU, I've learned a lot. So what happened with all those degrees and all those years of job experience and all those stories, I finally earned my seat at the table. But what does that mean when you finally get at the table? Well, that means they finally listen to you. But then I had to deal with territories, and then I had to deal with programming events for students that they loved, and then they ended up stealing my ideas. And that was kind of a slap in my face, is to create programs and then take me out of the picture. And so that went to a higher level conversation. But when you work with Native students, you have to have a Native there. That's just common sense. They're not going to talk. They're shut down. They're not comfortable. And so I had to deal with telling departments how to advise Native students. I had to deal with them taking my ideas. And I have to deal with, oh, well, you're the Indian, so dance, Indian. Dance when we want you to dance, because that's what you're there for. And so that goes into cultural appropriation, and that goes to the VP and the president. And so I talked to my assistant director, who's also a tribal member of a different tribe. And when we met with the vice president, I said, I didn't think Washington being so progressive and you guys priding yourself with all these MOU tribes that we would be in this situation. And he apologized, and of course he is an action man, so I think he will look into things. But that made me really think about all these things that I worked with before, and it's an institutional thing, no matter where you go. And so I have to think about, as I go on in the work career and the workforce, I have to think about how do we make those changes better for the students? Because at the end of the day, that's what it's there for. And how do we make it so we're not in these mind frames? However, one thing that does keep me back to the mission and purpose is we deal with a lot of plant medicine, and that saves my day. We work with tinctures, and we're going to do roller balls next week, and I make teas, and I make just different things, lotions, oils. And I've really tried to incorporate that into Native American health sciences along with my coworkers, and we bring in traditional elders who have years and years of knowledge. And so I really feel like that has been kind of the main purpose and focus that's grounded me to counteract all those things. And so I wanted to conclude and then have a couple minutes for questions. At the top is my nieces. Mari, she's a senior. We're trying to get her to college. And then Josie, she's in 7th or 8th grade. Her mom's probably watching, getting mad. But she's in junior high. But I always tell them, they know my story, but not in the sense of how you guys are hearing it today. But I always tell them, if I can do it, you can do it, and anything is possible. And what I want anyone to take from this is, like, if you fail, it's okay. If you fail again, it's okay. If you fail again, it's okay. But keep going. Keep dusting yourself off and keep going. And, I am pretty traditional and I'm pretty spiritual, and I always think about what I was told is that some grandma or grandpa made a prayer for me, that's why I'm here. And so I want to honor that, and someday I want to make a prayer and somebody else can lead and go into a similar path. And then at the bottom are my uncles. My uncle Babe, most of you guys know him. He was a powwow vendor. He picked up every powwow. He was well known for his teepee lamps. And then my Uncle Newt. Not many people knew him. He was a pretty quiet, homebody type of guy. I lost them 10 months from each other. But they were, before my Uncle Babe became a powwow vendor, he was a hard laboring man. He did a lot of stagehand stuff, and my Uncle Newt worked in a eyeglass factory, and he would come home with calluses and cuts and blood. And I remember them always telling me, like, we're doing this so you don't have to do this. And they did not want me to be hard laboring. They wanted me to be educated. They wanted me to have an office job. They never, ever wanted me to do hard labor. And my only regret that I have, and I believe everything happens for a reason, but I do have a regret. I would graduate with my AA in 11. I lost them in 9 and 10. And so if there's anything I do regret that they never watched me walk across the stage. Yes, I know they were there in spirit, but so with every degree, I think about them. I think about my grandma, and I just I think about them a lot, and it keeps me motivated. It keeps me working on what I need to accomplish. And before I ask questions, my last thought was the Gonzaga thing. You know, some of my professors want me to submit my papers so my stories can be published. Not my stories, but some of our tribal history. And that's my ultimate goal, is to get our history into books, that it's written by our own people. But I had a conversation with a well-known professor, and she tried to tell me that because she researched my people, she knew what I knew. And I would say, I am that, I breathe that, I live that. You'll never know what I know. And so I get very defensive over things, and it's because I feel like for years and years and years we've been exploited, and now it's time that we can write our own stories from our own perspective, but yet we still have to fight with exploiting our culture. And so I've had a couple experiences at GU. I take them in strides, but I've always learned that if I can teach them, then hopefully if I can teach them something, then I'll feel accomplished. And I've noticed with her tone and voice, she's really changed in the last year. So hopefully it's smooth sailing the next 2 years, because I got to write my dissertation that we'll have to go through them. So I need them to at least agree that my dissertation's good. But Padamia, yay. Thank you. I'll answer some questions, but I just wanted you guys to have my emails. The top one is my work one, the bottom one's my personal one. I do scholarship stuff. I do advising for free. I can help in any way I can, so go ahead and take a picture or write it down. If you ever have a question, just feel free to email me, and I'll try to get back to you. I'll take some questions.
Thank you for having that slide, because one of our virtual viewers wanted to know if they could connect with you. So now I think she knows she can. I did want to say that your Uncle Babe, I still recall one of the last memories I have with him on the powwow grounds here for the Fort Omaha Intertribal Powwow. He always got here really early, right, before anybody else. And he was out there, and I think a news reporter just showed up. And I said, Babe, would you talk to him? And of course he did, and he represented things so well. So I'm very thankful for that memory. And you have, for everybody in the audience, I'm going to ask you to use this mic so that our Zoom people can hear you. But before we do that, there is a comment that came through that I need to read for you. This is from Nicole Benegas. And she said, I'm sending you love and encouragement. And she put Nicole Tamayo down. That wasn't smart. Sorry I couldn't make it in person, but thank you. You are brave, worthy, and inspiring. I'm so very proud of you. And there's more coming. Always carry your family with you. Just love your family and know that those who have gone, they are missed by many. And then I have a question from someone else. How are you feeling after a lot of work and academic work?
I think I'm really stressed. After I graduated with my master's, I got into working out and eating right. I have slipped off and gained about 10 pounds, but I really got into working out, eating, gardening, canning, all the things. And I can say it was in that moment I felt peace. I just did the brief Head Start job, which was like 8 to 4, and I had the summer off then. So from that whole summer, there was a summer where all I did was what I wanted to do. I powwowed, I exercised and gardened, and I found peace. And I remember that peace. And so that helped me to then, get back into school. And so now I have learned to balance my schooling, my family, and work. And this is the first time this year that I haven't had 2 jobs. So I also am happy that I only have 1 job. So it's all about finding balance.
Okay, and then there's a couple more comments, and then we'll allow the audience. And I'll say the names because I don't know if they maybe know you, and that's why they're sending them. Leah Simeon said, you are so awesome. And Alicia Quevedo, thank you for everything you shared, and I look forward to connecting with you. So, anybody in the room have a question? Okay. Thank you for asking a question. Ready to talk?
I share some candy with people.
That's sweet.
Thank you, Janelle. That was great. Just curious what you're thinking about for your dissertation.
So my advisor and me went back and forth because with GU's process, we don't do tests. We do what's called a candidacy paper, which is a peer-reviewed 20-page paper that I'll probably have to do this summer. So then I'll get passed, and then we can start the dissertation process. But originally, I wanted to do the peer-reviewed paper on our boarding school that was in Santee called Santee Normal Training School. That is a whole history that nobody talks about. It's not even written. And then I was going to do the dissertation on Dakota kinship styles. However, my advisor said to flip it, and I thought about it. And so I really hate lit reviews. I don't like lit reviews. And so what we had discussed was that I would do Dakota Wachoha or Dakota Lifeways as my methodology, and that would be my chapter 2. And so that will come with the candidacy paper, and that would be from mainly Ella Deloria, Vi Deloria, and Charles Eastman, and that will go into the dissertation, and the dissertation will be all about Santee Normal Training School. So that's what I'm thinking. Could change, but I'm pretty set on it.
Any other questions from anybody before we thank Janelle for being with us today?
So I saw that you had moved back. Are you working?
Would you mind, Teresa, so that they can hear?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I saw that you moved back, and I was wondering, did you, are you still working over there? Okay, so you're distant education and working distantly?
Yeah.
Because that's struggle, right?
So I resigned, and my boss took it, and when she met with her boss to tell him the news, the VP asked what they could do to retain me. And so my boss and me met, and we agreed on a hybrid situation. So I will be employed until May or June, and I go back every other month. So I'll go back next week for a week. In February, I'll probably go back for 2 weeks, and then I might have to go back in March and April, just because it's big recruiting. So yeah, I'll just fly in. I have coworkers I stay with. And it helps me and them because then I'll actually personally train the new staff. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, I do have a virtual question. And thank you to everybody. Thank you to the virtual audience and everyone. Listina wants to say you're very amazing. I love you. Cheyenne, what advice do you have for someone looking into graduate school? Study tips, how to balance work and graduate school?
So, first of all, with graduate school, I would really look for, depending on your status, I took out loans because I'm stupid. I'm just going to put that out there. I wanted the refund on undergrad, so I took out loans, so I got money. Now I got student debt. So with my master's program, I wanted to avoid as much debt as possible. So I went to UMD, and they have a scholarship program. And so I would, depending on your status as undergrad, if you want to avoid debt, look for scholarships with master programs that one either have a full ride into it where you work, your GA, you go to school, you live there, it's free. Or with a scholarship. My tuition was $10,000 and my scholarship was $7,000. So I had $3,000 and I got another scholarship. So I had a lot of I had a lot paid for. So that's your first step. What are you interested in? 2, what's the do the school have scholarships or do they have GA positions? And with working, know what you could work. Can you only work 20 hours a week? Can you work a full-time job? Or also maybe look at a job that goes into tuition reimbursement. Now a lot of schools, the employee can either go to school for free or they can go to school for 50%. So maybe you want to be, you know, an entry, like, you know, you want to go into an advising or an entry-level staff. But you could get a whole master's program for free. So there's a lot of things now like you can look into. Do a lot of research.
Excellent. How do you balance your needs and wants in relationship to the weight of going to school, I guess? Okay, I need to go back on that. Can you speak to the weight that you carry with all your decisions on how it may affect your family and community compared to non-natives? And how do you balance your needs and wants in relation to that weight?
Oh, okay. So this question actually got asked at Gonzaga in a workshop. So with natives, most of the time it's inbred that in your head that not only are you going to school for yourself, but you're going to school for your family, you're going to school for your community. You are an ambassador of that nation when you go to school. And so it is a lot of weight, and so it's a lot of pressure, and it also is more motivating. So when I go to Gonzaga in class, I'm Janelle Whipple, or I come from the Whipple family, but I'm actually representing the Santee Sioux Nation. And when I graduate, I could be wrong, but I don't know how many graduated from there that are enrolled Santee. So it's sacrifices, you know, it's unfortunately it's sacrificing sometimes personally what you want for the betterment of that community, and that's just kind of how it is, and it's something that we have to deal with, and so I've always held that in the back of my mind. I hope that answered that.
Janelle, I noticed something that you posted on social media, and it reminded me of what another gentleman said to me recently. When you leave the res and come back, sometimes it's really hard. People can treat you really in a very difficult way. Any comments on that?
It gets tough. You have a core group who support you, who followed you through, who have your back, who always have your back. But sometimes if I speak to how I paid $1,100 for a little rink-dink one-bedroom apartment, and now I'm paying $300, and I say, if you want to move off this res, you better have $3,000 saved, it's more of like, I'm a know-it-all, or who are you to say that? And it's kind of like, instead of looking at it as me giving advice, it's kind of looked at as you're kind of a know-it-all, or you always have something to say. That's what it kind of is like. So it's kind of like sometimes I'm embraced for my advice, and sometimes people just kind of roll their eyes and say, oh, here she goes again. And I just take the punches and the rolls as they come.
I know we're getting deep into these, but there is another question you might want to answer. How do you suggest we encourage our Native children to go to college? I'm a mother to 2 daughters.
One thing that I always said at Head Start was education is not the school's responsibility. And people are like, what? But it's not. Education starts at the home. And so even if you're not a college graduate, you can always encourage your kids to go to college. Reading to them, spending time with them, telling them the importance on why they need to go, how they can better themselves. I would really encourage her to talk to her children to see what sparks their interests. What are they interested in? And never discourage a child's dream. Dream big. I remember those 2 men would always let me dream and be big, and whatever I wanted to do, it was never too much. But how do you get them to that level? Like, if they want to be an astronaut, don't say, oh, that's crazy. How would they become an astronaut? What do they have to take? Well, they have to learn, they have to love math and science. So getting them to love math and science, and then helping them get there. So I would encourage her to really find out, what does her child like? What is their interest? And then how do you get there? And don't ever let finances ever discourage you. There's a will, there's a way. And so just talking to her children to find out their hobbies, their interests, their passion.
So I want to thank both of our audiences, the one that's here in person with encouraging looks, and the one that's virtually out there sending there's a lot of really nice messages of thanks to you for sharing your story. I want to thank everybody. It's great to have a good Q&A session. And Janelle, you raced here with your responsibilities in Santee, and we're so thankful you got here safely, and that you took the time. It was convenient for us that you were back in Nebraska, but we would have brought you from Washington anyway. So, do you have any final thoughts for the audience before we part?
Just thanks for coming. I appreciate it. And like I said, there was my email. If you need to reach out, feel free.